decided that, well, yes, we can undoubtedly get into the underground of Mars, but they radioed back, we need some coordinates of the sections you wish to have explored. And they got those, and they put them in the computer, and what they did the first time was they sent a TV camera through there, operational, and put it in through the time tunnel to see whether or not the thing got locked up or came out in a free cavern.
If you're locked up in rock, can you send the camera close to the rock to see the rock wall in front of you?
Well, the problem is that the way those time tunnels worked,
or you may fall out of the tunnel.
You come out of the tunnel,
embedded in the rock,
and you become embedded into whatever's there, if there's anything there for you to become embedded in. You will not bounce off the wall. So in any case, they found it was clear, and then they sent a crew through, Duncan and myself, and there have been other crews since, and a lot of exploration was done in the underground of Mars to find...
Who was psychically manipulating and controlling the tunnel when Duncan was up there? Somebody else, probably.
No, there was not another human operator required after the first trip. The reason was that all of the coordinates and all of the basic information, the psychic information which was used off of Duncan, was recorded on a tape recorder, very exotic one, of course, and all of those coordinates were then restored. And, of course, they could make course corrections for the movement of the planets. There was no problem.
Compensation.
Total compensation. And what they did when they wanted to go again is they would just push the button for the tape and the whole system, and when they got a green light that everything's go, we went in the tunnel.
Tape,
right. Well,
the underground caverns.
Right. So we went. We made, I believe it was 2 authorized trips, and we went on our own with 2 unauthorized trips, because all we had to do was put the reel of tape in the machine and plug the button. And when it lit up green, we went.
And go on a joyride.
And took a joyride to Mars.
So what did you discover in the underground base?
Oh, we discovered huge amounts of religious artifacts and statuary, large numbers of files, which for some reason Duncan could read.
Were they on paper or on
They were on
gold
some type of metallic leaf that looked like paper, but it was indestructible. And we found other hardware and machinery. Eventually, we found their power system was still workable, and we just had to find a place to turn it on, so we had artificial lighting, their own, in the underground after this, I think, the second trip. First trip, we had to take our own lighting. Well, we found...
Did you see any sculptures or photographs of these guys to tell us how they looked? Were they human in size and appearance?
They were very human in size and appearance. They were basically the American Indians. That was where the American Indians came from, Mars. But much prior to that, about 300,000 years ago, is an estimate. It's not necessarily an accurate date. So statues, they were taller then, and...
how tall were they?
The statuary ran about 7, 8 feet. So the inhabitants at that time were taller than they are now on Earth, because they had a somewhat weaker field of gravity.
I've read from many contactee sources that the intensity of the gravitational field of the planet, basically Billy Meyer through his Pleiadians is the main source for me. The intensity of the gravitational field of a planet decides the height of the beings living on that planet, and this height can vary anywhere from the dwarfs a few inches to giants of 10, 15 meters, which is about 40 feet.
And speaking of that, of course, we have legends from the past history of Earth, and the bones have been found and well hidden, of course, that giants 15, 20 feet high. Humans, giants, and we don't know how they could have lived and survived. And of course, this question has been asked by many people, archaeologists, zoologists, whatever. How could these huge dinosaurs have existed with their mass? They didn't have a sufficiently strong bone structure to support their weight and mass, assuming our Earth's gravity was then the same as it is now.
So back to the Martian caverns.
It was not. It was about 0.3, a couple 150 million years ago. Back to the Martian caverns. We took out what we could, then we were discovered that we had made a few unauthorized trips, so we were pulled off of it and other crews were sent.
How about I remember that you were telling me some time ago about this strange gold that was several times heavier than normal gold.
According to Duncan, and that's the only source I have on that, there was some 15,000 metric tons of gold which were brought back from the underground of Mars, and it had a density factor of something like 5 times Earth gold.
Were you able to measure these?
I don't know how they measured it.
Tons? I don't know how they measured them after bringing them back to Earth.
I'm sure it was after they brought it back. But that's the story he tells and that he remembers. I have no recollection of that. It might have been that he went on a later trip that I didn't go on and he saw the gold. I did not. But there were
No skeletons? No traces of war or fighting?
No skeletons, nothing there. There was very clean and aseptic, you might say, in the underground. They took care of the last of their bodies before they died, because we estimate that the last of this Martian civilization that moved underground died out perhaps 10 to 20,000 years ago, and that, of course, is a rough estimate. But they died out, and apparently their systems were put on a timer, or they had automatic shut-offs, and eventually, well, the power shut off. The only thing that kept going, and this is a very strange item, is the radio transmitter in the face on Mars. NASA has commented on this.
So
they're receiving a weak signal.
Is that true?
Yeah. That's transmitter, though very weak, is still transmitting, and NASA could pick it up. But that was the end of our Mars escapades. And we came back, and Duncan and I were split from working together because there were other people who had other projects in mind for him and myself. And one of the other projects we're working on there, of course, two of them I will go into, because one is gone into in the book, and the other is not, was, of course, the indoctrination of these young kids, almost all blonde-haired, blue-eyed, all males, some 10,000 at Montauk, in the age bracket between 12 and 17, typically around puberty. And some of them...
Cloned?
No. They were run through... Some of them, the later ones, were cured as street kids through the time tunnels from other parts of the U.S. because they wouldn't be missed being street kids. Initially, they were...
With time tunnels?
Yeah.
Or with a saucer craft hovering above and teleporting them, beaming them up?
No, I believe it was all with the time tunnels. The earlier phases of this, they actually went around with trucks on Long Island physically and picked up kids and kidnapped them. And, of course, there was a hell of a furor over some of the kids disappearing on the island from the families. And what they were doing was they were put in through initial processing to see if they were suitable for the project. And when they got to a certain point and they realized that they were acceptable, they were given a very heavy Reichian programming. And the Reichian programming in the earlier stages was purely physical, psychosexual. And for the sake of the sensitive hearts that may be in the audience, I will not detail it exactly, except it was a fully homosexual procedure. And later on, because of the fact...
That was using the pure orgasmic state.
Exactly, the pure orgasmic state, to transfer the program from the programmer to the programmee, which was the kid.
No hardware.
No hardware in the early phases. Too many kids died from this procedure, and I, among others, screamed bloody murder and said, you've got to change this procedure, and it was eventually changed to an all-electronic procedure.
What did they do with these surplus kids?
Surplus kids that didn't make it? They threw them in the vault on the underground, and the time when we left, there was about 400 bodies buried in that vault. Huge steel vault with a very large lock, so nobody could get in there without the right combo.
By the way, Preston Nichols, in his book, The Montauk Project, again, the book here, he's talking about the skeletons that were cleared right before the base was abandoned and the entrances were concreted with concrete.
That may well be. I have no idea.
What were these kids intended for?
That's what we're still...
For the future?
That's what we're still trying to find out.
Where did they end up? Did they send them, shoot them in the future for some missions for the...
We believe most of them were sent into the future, and there are some clues to indicate that many of them wound up in the time frame of 1995-96. And they had an implanted program, which in essence said, you go about your normal life wherever you are, and when we want you to do whatever you want, we want you to do, a radio signal, actually not pure electromagnetic, but second-order scalar type signal.
Which would be a telepathic signal.
Right, exactly. It hits...
Undetectable, but by any of the conventional hardware that...
Right. And these individuals would pick up the signal, and if they were tuned to the coding in the signal, they would hear a message, and Preston proved this with hardware which he's resurrected and tried it himself. They would get this message, if you hear this message, call such and such phone number.
Telepathic message right in their head, without
exactly.
any hardware, without little bug into their brain.
Right.
Directly into their telepathic
antenna. And the range of this transmitter is enormous.